Today I'm going to be talking about Kirk Wilcox's video, Georgism Sounds Like Collectivist Nonsense. The link to that, as well as BrickMonkey's video, Georgism 101, will be linked below. Please watch both for full context. However, I understand if my English teacher does not have time for that, as this is an English assignment.
Now, this is obviously a second-handed approach to Georgism. I'm getting this information second-handed. So if you're a Georgist, and if you don't think this video accurately represents Georgism as a political idea, as an ideology, then take it up with this video, okay? I'm only responding to what's in this video. If this is not a proper representation of Georgism, not my fault.
Please keep this in mind during the video, because it helps with a point later on.
It should equally belong to all members of society.
Land should belong to equally all members of society. You hearing that?
From mining. Surely, as nobody invented land, it should equally belong to all members of society.
Yeah, you hear that, guys? Where have we heard this idea before? All land should be collectively owned, should belong to everyone equally in society? Where have we heard that before?
Like the...
I believe here he is referring to communism. Communism is the idea of everything being shared equally, whether or not it was created by someone. This is different, as land was not created, so it should be shared equally just as water and air should. Even considering food that was grown on the land still should be compensated for because of the effort and time that was put into growing the food. So you should be paying for that. However, under communism, there should be no compensation because you already have everything you need.
Wall it off and call it your home. You should expect the rest of society to respect that. Therefore, you should pay a tax on the value of the land you are trying to claim to pay for that protection from society. Because other people now don't have access to the land, they should be compensated for it.
Now that other people don't have access to the land, they should be compensated from this. You getting this, folks?
Yes, you should be compensated. Because if I were to go to your public park, wall it off, and say you cannot use this anymore, you want something in return. You want to be compensated for that. Because I took the land that you use on a daily basis.
And the more value you extract, the more value you create using the land, then the more the state gets to take from you.
I believe what you just did here was describe property taxes, which is different than land value taxes.
If you were to go to Staples, I've used this example before, but think about if you were to go to Staples or a place like Office Depot, and you were to buy a ream of paper and maybe some ink in the form of ink pens, you can probably get a ream of paper and a pack of ink pens for about $10. The resources alone are about $10. And that's all it's worth on the market. It's $10. Now, say you were to take that ream of paper and that ink, which are only worth $10, you could take those resources and you can make it worth millions of dollars. If you're a creative person, like a J.K. Rowling or a Stephen King or an Ayn Rand, you can take a ream of paper and some ink, which are worth $10, and you can turn it into, make it worth millions of dollars by writing compelling novels. But a Georgist, he would see the added value you've added to the raw resources of just ink and paper. A Georgist may try to take credit for this achievement, for they let you use the raw materials to create that value in the first place, which apparently belong to the rest of society.
Blow it.
The difference here is that somebody made that paper. No one made land. That's one of the main arguments for Georgism. This point is even stupider when you take into account that Henry George made loads of money off of his book, Progress and Poverty, which is a book all about Georgism and its values.
Didn't Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks try to apply this wonderful idea of collectivizing all land, make sure all the land is owned equally by members, all the members of society, and that all value extracted from the land can be seized to be given to other people? Didn't Lenin and the Bolsheviks try to apply this wonderful idea to the kulaks and other attempts to collectivize agriculture in communist Russia? How did that turn out, folks?
Again, communism wants everything to be collectivized. Early stage Georgism still wants you to have land. They just want you to compensate everybody for taking that land. Henry George was not radical. He saw that land ownership was way too out of control to be collectivized. And yes, Georgism, unlike communism, works in its early stages and later stages. Communism's biggest problem is that it's never gotten to the later stages, because everybody that tries it wants to skip to those later stages, but you have to ease into it with socialism. Also, no, half the Bolsheviks did not want pure communism. They didn't want everything to be collectivized. Read up on New Economic Communism, which is what most of them wanted and actually caused a split in the party. I'll leave a little blurb about it in the description so you can read up about it.
Imports. After the wealth was used to fund the government, whatever was left from that tax is to be shared out to society in the form of a citizen's dividend.
Citizen's dividend, which is just a fancy way of saying wealth redistribution. And here's a thought. So say this is a more efficient way of collecting revenue for the government for the proper functions, military, police, justice system. Let's say it's a more efficient way, and there's, after, collecting all of the taxes, the land value taxes, let's say there is a significant surplus. Why not just roll that over into the next budget for the next year, and then reduce land taxes accordingly going forward?
No, you should not roll over the excess into the next year, because land value tax is a progressive tax. The tax rate should not be manipulated by the government. Remember what he said at the beginning of the video about not misrepresenting points. He just did that.
Income taxes. People would no longer need to give away what they have worked hard to earn to pay for the work of the government. Only the rich landowners would pay for services.
Only the rich landlords? I thought he said all landowners.
Yes, the rich would be paying more taxes, as they have loads more land than the common person, but it's all still collectively paid by everybody. They just happen to be spending more money.
Dive on grenades for landlords. But he's saying, like, oh, it'll be easier for people to move because landlords won't be jacking up rents, when I think landlords in a lot of ways make it easier for people to move. Because say, if I live in California and I'm under this Georgia's paradise where there are no landlords, and I gotta buy my own house for housing, for shelter. Say I want to move to, say, Nevada or Arizona. Well, I can't just, pack up and move because there'd be no place to rent. I'd have to buy a completely new house. Who's going to rent me a house? Landlords don't exist. Hotels presumably don't exist. What is a hotel other than a landlord who just rents out for short-term profits? So I think landlords in a lot of ways make it easier because they are offering a service that I think would be in demand probably under any economic system, and that is temporary housing, short-term, maybe long-term housing, but year to year, month to month. You don't have to, wherever you move, you don't just have to buy a new piece of land and buy a new house.
This ignores the fact that under Georgism, the government is essentially a landlord, because eventually nobody would own land, so the government would own all the land, and you essentially just rent out to them. You can settle down wherever you want, and you can move wherever you want. But that's still late-stage Georgism. Early-stage Georgism will still have landlords, but eventually they will be phased out.
And without using it, we'll still have
people who don't use the land just sit on it.
4. Inefficiency. Landowners who simply sit on the land without using it will still have to pay the land value tax.
Still have to pay the tax.
And as they aren't making money off this land, there will be more of an incentive to sell the land to whoever is willing to buy it and make better use of it.
So here we go. So first off, it's not necessarily about efficiency, but it's more about trying to force people into being productive. Because if they're not developing the land, they're going to have an incentive so that they can make money to pay the tax, or they're going to have an incentive to sell it to someone who might develop on it. Forcing people into being productive. What's another word for forcing people into being productive, folks?
Forcing people to do something with the land is exactly what we want to happen. Remember, this does not affect homes. Affects empty/dilapidated land, as shown in the video. Sitting on land like that helps no one.
This might actually discourage development, because if you have undeveloped land with nothing on it and then suddenly you put a building there, guess what? The value of the land increases, and so does your tax burden. What happens if...
No, land value tax does not discourage improving the land, as it taxes the raw value of the land. If you look at the picture that Britt uses in the video, it's in the middle of a city. That's already valuable land. Your tax will not change if you build a shed out in the middle of nowhere, because it's a value of the land, not the value of what's on the land.
If you build a duplex or some other building on the land in hopes of making a profit, but then you struggle to find buyers. Or you build a duplex that you want to rent out and struggle to find tenants. What happens if you own undeveloped land and don't develop it, and you're not able to afford to pay the taxes, and also cannot find a buyer to buy the land and take it off your hands?
This makes no sense, because if you're already in a part of the country where the tax is so high that you cannot afford it, that means the land is valuable. So if the land is valuable, then people want the land. So you should not have any issue of finding a buyer.
What happens if you own undeveloped land and don't develop it, and you're not able to afford to pay the taxes, and also cannot find a buyer to buy the land and take it off your hands? I assume then the state will come in and seize your land, and then what? The state seizes it. Now they're not making any money because there's nobody owning the land to pay the taxes. Then what will the state do with it? Will they make it better? Will they develop the land? Will they make productive use of it? With what money? Money that they're going to have to take from other landowners by raising more taxes, which would just exacerbate the problem, exacerbate the situation.
Even if the government seizes your land, which is a completely unrealistic scenario, as you could always sell it because it's valuable land if you can't afford the tax. The U.S. is no stranger to giving away land. Back in the 1800s, they had races to plots of land, and whoever got there first got the land. They just gave it away for free. And this does not even mention the unsettled land and unowned land all across the country that the government isn't making any property taxes off, but they still have plenty of money.
The value of the air, the land, and the ocean. Land value tax is a progressive tax based on the unimproved value of the land.
Now notice this picture. You got tax and not tax. So this video cannot seem to decide whether or not residential land is going to get taxed. Before, they say, oh yeah, the rich people, because they live on more expensive land, they'll pay a lot of the taxes. In the beginning, they show an animation where there's a house on land and you're walling it off. You have to pay the land value tax. But in this picture, they make it look like that your house is not going to get taxed, just the productive uses, like the farms as seen in the picture. So it looks like if this is true, housing won't get taxed. So then what are they going to tax? Just the land that you use exclusively for productive use? Which they're saying, oh, well, it's going to replace income taxes, which is great because income taxes, they just tax your labor, they tax your work.
The image Brett uses circles the building, not the land under the buildings.
where you buy cheap land with a low tax burden, then you build a house. You build your own house that you designed, that you love, the way you like it. And you build it and it's your house. And then say, decades later, 2-3 decades later, maybe the area around you develops to the point where the value of your land goes through the roof. Or say maybe an oil tycoon discovers that your house is built on oil deposits. And even if you don't sell your mineral rights, the value of your land has gone through the roof, maybe by 3, 4, 5 times. So now they're going to increase your tax burden, and maybe in that context, maybe your income has not went up. So what do you do then? What if it becomes to the point where you cannot keep up with the increased land value and the taxes applied? Especially with this, when this video kind of tries to paint it as, oh, this is better for the poor because they're getting a citizen's dividend, and we're just taking it from the rich. Wouldn't rich people have a leverage in this situation? If you're struggling to pay the taxes that are being applied to you because the value of your land increased, and then if a rich buyer, a rich investor, maybe the oil tycoon, if they notice that you're struggling to keep up with those tax bills, maybe they'll just say, hey, maybe I'll just let the state take their property for me, and then I can buy it at a discount.
This is the first real point he makes. However, he debunks himself, as the citizen's dividend will help pay for taxes if you cannot afford them. And there's not much land left that people want to go settle. For example, the youngest city in the US was founded in 2011, and the only reason why it was founded was because it broke away from a larger city.
And Medicare. Good luck building a movement to replace income tax with land value taxes when, especially when retirees, probably a lot of retirees relying on low tax property that they paid off and untaxed SSI to survive. Good luck.
And I'm sure those old people living on that property that have low tax will be able to continue living on there even with a land value tax, because property tax takes into account the land itself and what's on the land. So realistically, they'd have even lower taxes than what they would be paying now. Thank you for watching this video. As stated before, this is a school project, so that's why I'm being so nice to this guy, even though he is not being very nice to any ideology besides his own.